This is the Balanced Advisor Podcast with Dr. Travis Perry, helping financial advisors like you achieve balance in their lives.
Alex Cavalieri is the co-founder of Seven Group, a marketing platform for financial advisors. They bring together strategy and coaching, marketing, technology, and content creation with the goal of helping every advisor market in the digital age. He's also the host of the Advisor Lab podcast, a podcast with one main idea: help advisors build better relationships and brands. Welcome, Alex, to the Balanced Advisor podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm psyched to have the conversation.
Yeah, so we're talking a little bit about your background and your experience in the field. Tell us a little bit about what got you started in the financial industry.
Yeah, so I kind of fell into the financial industry. So I left college back in 2010. And I didn't actually have a job coming to New York City. So I just straight up made the jump to New York City. I'm from Michigan, so I'm a Midwesterner at heart. But I told my parents, I was like, all right, my brother and I were going to go to the city and try it out. Jumped to the city, was not employed. I was very focused on sports in college. I played a sport. So I was totally focused on not getting an internship. Anyway, came to the city, applied for jobs everywhere. I think I applied for about 100 jobs, ended up getting a sales job. I was on the sales desk of a headhunting shop. And so for the first 8 months of my life in New York, I was making 100 to 120 calls a day. And every advisor who listens to this will know that grind of if they worked in a wire or they worked at even they're a junior advisor, they know the grind of making those cold calls a day. It's funny. I mentioned 100 to 120 cold calls a day. And I had one client on the Seven side just laugh at me because he was I was making 300 calls a day. I was all right. So fast forward, I was in that role for 8 months. I ended up getting referred over to and I started to really enjoy marketing. So as a headhunter, you had to really market yourself. It was right when Twitter was getting hot, right when social media was getting hot. So I enjoyed that side of things. And I ended up getting referred over to a role at BlackRock. So ended up going kind of just backing into finance and luckily got hired at BlackRock. And I was there for 7 years. I worked in a number of different marketing capacities. I was working on the defined contribution business, really talking heavy TDF, target date funds, to advisors and plan sponsors, building marketing campaigns around those. I worked on the ETF business, the iShares business. I worked in the BlackRock side, the mutual fund business as well, all within a marketing capacity. And then I jumped over to a smaller asset manager to run marketing for them, which is in the alternative space. And then about a year ago or so, ended up launching Seven Group. And essentially it really happened organically. I was doing a lot of value add for advisors at conferences. So we would do value add presentations and value add discussions. And for that perspective, advisors were coming up to me at the end of the presentations and asking, do you have services for this? Do you have any, a platform for this? And it got to an inflection point where I, went to two other partners and I said, we got to see if there's a business here. So essentially went out, interviewed 60 advisors, really figured out where the gaps were in the space, and then ended up launching Seven. And we're coming up to our year anniversary in about a week.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Yeah,
it sounds like you followed where the niche was, where the need was, and then you interviewed it. I mean, I've done about 92 interviews for my book, Achieving Balance, at this point, and when this launches, it'll be a lot. Hopefully we'll break 100 by then. But you're doing the right things. You're researching, you're finding out what advisors need. So you're a great voice to have on the show. I'm excited to talk to you about what you've seen with advisors as we talk about work-life balance. Before we dive into that direction, tell us what everybody has a different definition of work-life balance. What is your definition, Alex?
Yeah, so my definition of work-life balance is really finding the right breakdown of what works for you as well as those around you that you love. And I think that there's a lot of people say you can't make other people happy until you make yourself happy. And for a lot of entrepreneurs, that is work, and work is a big fulfillment space, and it fills a big gap as it relates to a need that people have in their lives, right? If you're enjoying the work that you're doing, you want to do more of it. So I think in my view, the definition of true work-life balance is really finding the percentage breakdown of, how much time do I want to spend on my work? And then how much time do I, want to spend with my family? And then really making sure that the people around you, your team, your family, your boss, whoever it is, really you're very clear about what that breakdown is. Because I think that's where most people get it wrong, is that like they may have this idea in their mind, but they don't necessarily communicate that idea. And then when they get asked to work more or spend more time with family, you're getting to a place where like now you're butting heads with what you want and what you're communicating, because the people on the other side don't necessarily understand it.
Yeah, that is so true. I've seen that a lot with advisors, especially that they just don't communicate that boundary, but they have an idea of what it is, and they're not able to, create that differentiation between work and home. And now with COVID, everybody's at home, right? Or some kind of hybrid model. And so it all got turned on its head pretty quickly. So as an advisor to advisors, I mean, what are your biggest issues that you've seen with financial advisors as they're trying to get balance, as they're trying to, achieve that balance?
Yeah. And it's an interesting question, because we have this conversation both with clients as well as on the podcast a lot. I think it obviously depends on like the scale of the advisor. You're either at like 100, you're the sub 100 million, you're over 100 million, you're over 250, you're over 500, you're over $1 billion, right? Those are kind of like the break points of how people generally think about the advisor community. And from that perspective, when you're growing and you're scaling, one of the biggest things that we run into with clients is being able to let go of certain things, is being able to let go of specific tasks that you need to take in order to run your business efficiently, and not being able to do that because you've done them for so long and you don't necessarily trust passing that off to someone, or you just don't feel comfortable letting go of it for whatever reason. So I think that's one of the biggest things that we struggle with, that we talk to advisors about and their struggle with, is how do you start to allow others, and I even struggle with this sometimes as like an entrepreneur, right? How do you allow yourself to let go of tasks, to entrust people to do them for you, so you can focus on the things that really matter for the business? And then I think the other thing that we see advisors struggle with, particularly on the marketing communication side, is how do you get to a place where you're able to create a communication strategy, or you're able to create a marketing strategy that over time starts to work for you versus you always working for it. And I think where, that does take a long time to get to. It takes 6 months, it takes a year, it takes 18 months to get to. But I think once you're in that spot of having your marketing work for you more effectively, you're able to spend your time either with clients or find more balance in your personal life.
Two really good points, that delegation aspect, and then the marketing working for you instead of the other way around. Like I put that, I want to get to both of those and kind of dive a little bit deeper. On a strengths-based platform, you're looking at what's worked for you and what maybe you've seen work for other advisors. How do you let go of those tasks? How do you delegate? I mean, before we were doing the pre-show, we were just talking about how, we edit the podcast and other things. And we both are kind of in that same mantra that we need to delegate, right? You need to be productive and do the things that you do well. But some people have a psychological barrier. Some people just struggle with letting it go because they think they can do it better, kind of a perfectionist mentality. Maybe what do you struggle with, and what's been a strength for you as far as being able to let go?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing I've struggled with is personally with it when it comes to marketing, whether it's creating a creative piece, a presentation, a graphic, a piece of content, right? I've always pride myself on speed. So I can move very quickly in and out of systems. I can move very quickly in and out of a video system, out of a deck, out of a specific website or a specific back end of a website, whatever the case may be, I've traditionally been able to move very fast. So that's something where I've struggled with, is like when I pass that off, not seeing that speed reciprocated, but I have to slow myself down because I have to say, like, I've been doing this for 10 years, which is why that speed is there. So the way I've tried to manage that effectively with others that I've worked with and the others that have worked for me is really train them up in terms of how I know the platforms. And we even do this with advisors, right? So big part of our platform on the 7 side is training advisors up to use some of these editing platforms like a Canva or Camtasia or whatever the case may be, to edit their own stuff. And from that perspective is really being super crystal clear about, one, expectations on like the output with others around you. So like, what do you expect in what time frame? And then 2, making sure that they know the exact direct steps in order to execute on that in a manner that's kind of able to get out the door. Right. So from that perspective, like whether it's a written set of guidelines or you're doing a custom training with those individuals, or you're doing it with them the first 3 times that you do it, that's been able to get me over that hump of letting it go, because I've been able to work with people and guide them in a way that still works for the output that we're trying to achieve and the quality we're trying to achieve.
Yeah, great answer. Expectations are clear. They have exact steps and guidelines, and everybody has a different, definition of delegation, just like they have a different definition of balance. So it's nice to hear kind of what you do and what works for you, because letting go is definitely a difficult thing for a lot of business owners and financial advisors to do as they're building their team. I think at first, and then when they get the feel for it and they like it, they're trying the best they can to try to get that out to others. I think that's great. So talk to us a little bit about the number 2 part, and that's the marketing communication side. How do you get it, like you mentioned, where marketing is working for you?
Yeah. So I think it comes down to a few things. So one of which is, getting to a place where you're developing a cadence of content that fits within your schedule. So for example, like we get to a place with advisors to where on a weekly basis, advisors should really be spending anywhere from 30 to 45 minutes a day from a marketing perspective. That's not a lot of time, right? So whether you're writing content or you're checking your ad content, or you're checking your ad performance, or you're shooting a video, really getting to a place where within your schedule can you make marketing work for you? And from that perspective, you're getting to a point where it's not necessarily taking time away from your schedule. You're building your marketing and communications development within your schedule already. So that's the first thing that we do, is like when we start to work with advisors, we get to a place of, okay, how can we can carve out time within your current schedule to where like you may read the newspaper, or you may have some downtime where you just think about work or whatever it is, right? And you start to sandwich in marketing from that perspective. That's the first thing, that making your marketing work for you. You're trying to leverage those pockets of time that you already have. The second thing that we try to do is, how do we get things effectively automated in a way that makes sense for the advisor? So that could be a few things, right? You could be running consistent paid ads on a weekly or a monthly basis. You could be sending out automated emails on a cadence of people who fill out forms. So how do you get to a place where you can find pockets of automation in your marketing? Not a lot, because too much automation can actually hurt your business versus help your business. But from that perspective, really get to a place where you are finding those right pockets of automation, as well as leveraging paid advertising to effectively promote specific initiatives or specific campaigns, to where you're driving more inbound form completion versus always having to go outbound.
Yeah, that's the ideal, right? Is to have the inbound stuff. I mean, that's music to any advisor's ears. Right. But I like what you talked about of, scheduling it as part of your own calendar. And that's a big part of where I'm at, is helping advisors with time management. But if they don't schedule getting on LinkedIn for 15 minutes a day, you're going to hire somebody to do that. And even then, that's usually not the best thing to do. Initially, you need to be able to be out there and be a person and be a character so that people can latch on to your personality. So I'm curious, which one do you push first? Do you say, let's go all automated ads and emails? Do you try to build in their calendar first? Is there one that you integrate better, or do you at the same time? What do you usually see the most effective for advisors so they can leverage their time and get that marketing working for them?
Yeah, so it's funny, the first place we always start with advisors when they come into the 7-group program is their website. So if your website's not set up effectively, if you don't have your forms connected into your marketing system, which is connected into your CRM, and you don't have your website structured in a way where if someone actually wants to contact you or download something, your forms aren't set up appropriately, or your content's not set up appropriately. And if your messaging on your website isn't talking to your target audience, you could do all the marketing in the world, right? But if you don't have that home base to where people can actually dive deeper and then contact you, then it's always going to fall flat. And that's where I think advisors get it so wrong, is like they want to run and just do Facebook right away, or run and just do Google ads right away. But it's like, no, take a step back. If we're driving people to your website, we need your website to be optimized. So that's the first place we always start. And then the second place we start is the second place we go is the content backlog. So from that perspective, you can do all the distribution in the world, but if you don't have the content to fuel it, then you can't distribute. And it goes back to the old saying that like content is the be all end all of a marketing program. So from that perspective, you need to make sure that your content backlog is filled out. You need to make sure that you have a consistent cadence for producing content. So before we start to run any ads or like get any automation set up, we get the advisor into like a good cadence of creating content. And from that perspective, you're creating content on a regular basis. You're writing articles, you're doing video content, you're pushing those out consistently on a regular basis, and you're measuring what that impact looks like. And then you're getting into a place where like, how do you automate it? How do you boost it, et cetera?
I appreciate that. Yeah, that sounds much more manageable to be able to come in and just, focus on that home base instead of just going out and trying to echo chamber something that's not working. That you'd fix what's working there at home, first at home base. I love that as the website idea, and then going out and measuring what you're putting out as far as content. Because I know I'm guilty. I'll create content, and my measurement is like how many likes that I get, and that's okay. But I might not actually create a spreadsheet and a system that's there. But I'm a systems guy. I should have somebody looking at that if I was running with that, very, very strictly. I do personally. I've got email marketing that has built-in, stats on and reports on how I send out those emails and what kind of responses I'm getting. But what would you say, speaking of those two directions, for advisors, are they better off milking their emailed lists and get people to a newsletter, kind of like a Kitchus approach? We've got articles and people are coming to your website, and he's got 45,000 people on his newsletter. Or is it better to send out content to social media now with every avenue that's out there available, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, et cetera, Instagram? Which direction, if you had to focus and you had to push somebody a direction, would you tell them to go?
Well, so what I would say is that it depends, and it depends on what your current email list looks like. So if you have a very strong organically built email list, whether it's from referrals or whether it's from some other way you built it, right, over time. And so you have a list of 800 people that are a core set of prospects that you've been in contact with over a number of years. From that perspective, I would say the email list is a great place to start, right? Because you're nurturing people, you're getting people into into hearing from you regularly. And from that perspective, you can go to a place where you promote that email list, whether it's a newsletter or some other type of distribution that you send out. You can promote that in an effective way on social, right? So you can leverage social to drive people into building that on top of that newsletter list. I think it always comes back to building that email list. So like whether you have an email list built or not, it always comes back to doing something in order to build that email list as much as you can. A lot of people don't have that email list built out. They have an email list of 0, or they have such a unfortunately crappy email list that they either bought or they scraped or whatever the case may be, that even if they do send out and try to nurture those prospects, it's just going to be singular percentage open rates, and it's going to be high unsubscribe rates. So from that perspective, where you got to get to is you need to leverage both. You need to leverage both your email list distribution as well as social. Social is really the top of the funnel to drive people to your digital properties. And then your email list is and then your newsletter is to get those people to convert. And so you can nurture them over time. So you always want to drive people, like the email list is like the gold, the gold standard, the mecca of your marketing, but you need to do social, both paid and organic, at the top of the funnel in order to get people into that email list.
I appreciate that clarity. I mean, obviously, yeah, of course it depends on where you might be at, but I think you're right. I think most advisors, they don't have a really great list, or they haven't nurtured it. There are a few that I know that can boast of, several thousand, and they even have a podcast for their own clients. And that's that content, right? It's that content creation, but because they're trying to put out consistent material, that's an engaging audience. That audience will follow you and they'll refer. I think that's a beautiful way to do it. Well, very well said. What, as we're kind of looking at some of the things that we were talking about that brought us from work-life balance and advisors, yeah. I find that work-life balance advisors really struggle with email themselves. They struggle with the management of email. And so it's kind of interesting that you're talking about building your own email list to try and, hit others with that medium, that's still such a sticking point. So as a marketer, if I'm an advisor and I'm seeing hundreds of emails every day, I'm not convinced that email is the best way to go. And I'm just throwing this out here to play little devil's advocate with you. What do you tell them to convince them that no, email is still legitimate? Like that is still like the backbone of where you're talking about. Are there some good stats to think about? Maybe long-term, is that the game? Is it long-term game with that?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, like it all comes down to content, right? So if you could have a great distribution list, you could have people that know you, but if you're going to send them boring content, then it's never going to stick. And this is where I think a lot of advisors get it wrong, where they outsource their email content and they end up getting to a place where the email marketing never works for them because it falls flat. Because the content creation that they're doing isn't necessarily their own personal lens, or it's not necessarily written by them. So I think the first thing is like, you could have the best distribution list in the world, but if you put garbage into their inbox, they're going to ignore it. I think the other thing to remember is that from an email perspective, advisors are getting 1 million emails a day. Their investors are getting, end users or end customers are getting 1 million emails a day. But I think the question comes down to is how many investors are getting 1 million emails a day from advisors, right? In the B2B world, email runs rampant, right? You have people like marketing firms like ours emailing advisors every day, and you have, email platforms and different platforms emailing business professionals on a very regular basis, and it becomes exhausting. Then you have the investment managers also emailing advisors. So there's a lot that goes on there. Now, from an end consumer standpoint, they're not likely receiving financial emails from financial advisors on a consistent basis, or at least numerous financial advisors on a consistent basis. So when it comes to that B2C world, you're competing against the latest Starbucks gift card email, or like, the Nike.com email. You're not competing against other advisors per se. So I think from that perspective, one, figuring out what your content looks like, because obviously you need to build a content framework for email that works for your target audience. And then two, really figuring out a cadence that works, because if you're hitting people every week, you're hitting people every day, that's probably too much. And what we've seen in our data is that like an email once a month can bode really, really well for prospects. We've seen open rates remain consistent there. We've seen engagement rates and read rates remain consistent there. And that's a good cadence to where you're still staying top of mind, but you're not necessarily having to, one, produce an email every day, and then two, not necessarily having to feed that engine of, keeping your audience updated every day.
Yeah. Email overload is definitely not something we want to contribute to. So I like what you're saying about that. On the B2C world, the email once a month has worked for advisors. That's great. Well, I appreciate your time and letting us in on the knowledge that you've gained that I think is very helpful for advisors as they're trying to really gain balance. And as I've been trying to teach them to how to deal with their own email, I'm curious, strengths based on your side. What are tips that have worked for you to handle that beast? What's been, because I know you get B2B, you get B2C. I mean, you're helping people probably all day long. You're getting thousands of email. Just curious, what's worked for you in the past?
What's worked for me to manage the email or to communicate in an email form?
Yeah, to manage it yourself so that you're not being so overwhelmed with it.
Yeah. So where I think it comes down to two things is like when I look at, I'm a very chronologically ordered person. So like, I like to look at dates and timestamps as it relates to emails. That's been like my way of organization. I think the key there is that you need to be able to filter out the noise quickly with an email. And whether that's either a system that you have in place technically, like you have a filtering system on your emails, like Gmail has a good filtering system now, Outlook is getting better at it, to understand like what's junk and what's not. I think also too, what you have to ask yourself is when an email comes through the door, what is high priority? What is low priority? And what I mean by that is that it has been kind of molded into our brains that like an email comes in the door, you have to respond right away. Whether it's like an email from your mother or it's an email from another business owner, right? So from that perspective, we get to this place of like, you get the notification, you see the note, and you're like, I need to respond to this right away. And from that perspective, generally that's not true. And it's generally like you responding now versus 2 hours from now in most instances is not going to make or break something, right? Now there's nuances to that. There's an asterisk there because, for example, it's been proven in the data that if someone fills out a form on your website and if you don't respond to them in 5 to 10 minutes, then your ability to connect with that individual is going to drop dramatically. I don't know the specific percentage points around it, but essentially anything outside of 5 minutes of not following up with someone who fills out a form, they've already moved on to the next thing. So from that perspective, like in that instance, if you get that email, that's a high priority item. But if you get an email from, a client with a question that seemed seemingly low priority, that could be a lower priority item. So I think whether you physically write it out on like what's high priority and what's low priority, like hypo and low po, I think you can get to a place where, or you just mentally build it into your mind, is always looking at that lens of most of the time, there can be a space or a gap between how you respond and manage email communications. But there are those instances like if a form completion comes into your inbox, that's an instance where you need to really prioritize that. So I think it's more of mentally prioritizing high priority and low priority.
That's great. Coming from a marketing mind who's training advisors every day about what they can be doing to help that be a natural part of your process. I love it. Appreciate, your your voice on this and helping advisors be more balanced. Tell us, I mean, obviously you're in marketing, right, Alex? I mean, we've been talking about a little bit through here. How do people engage you? How can they reach out to you if they're wanting some help, and what does that help look like?
Yeah. So I'm on LinkedIn, just Alex Cavalieri. You can find me there. I'm, as Travis, you can attest to, like, I post a lot. So I'm very active there. I'm on Twitter at Al Cavalieri, big financial advisor Twitter community that we go back and forth on Twitter. For 7 Group, you can just go to the7group.com to check out our website. And then you can email myself, Alex at the7group.com, the in front of 7 Group. And then if you want to email 7 Group in general, it's info@the7group.com. So I could be pretty much reached anywhere. I'm not going to give out my personal cell phone number, but any social media network or email, I'm always available.
That's great. Well, I appreciate your time today. And if you could leave one key advice about keeping work-life balance at the forefront and achieving that, what would that be for advisors out there?
Find breaks in the day. I think, especially right now, I think it's so easy to wake up, walk to your computer, sit down at your computer, work for 12 hours, get up, eat dinner, go back to your computer. As much as that sounds, awful, that's the reality for a lot of people. It's just easy to get sucked into. So I think you have to find pockets of breaks through the day to spend time with your family or spend time to take a walk. And, most people, you generate your best ideas walking or running or out and about. You're not going to generate your best ideas at a computer. That's just the reality of it. You can write, you can crank, you can call. But in order to generate idea generation, it's getting out of your own head, your own mindset, your own screen, to really generate ideas. So find those breaks where you can really get to a place where, like, you can think about your business holistically. You can think about the future of your business. You can think about your business development, your marketing communications, and really, use that to infuse what you're doing on a day-to-day basis. Because without that, you're just going to look up one day and it's just going to, be 6 months later, we're still working remote and nothing's moving. So take time to really do some idea generation and take a break.
I love that. Thanks for sharing that knowledge with us and wisdom. And if you guys want to hit up Alex, go to the7group.com. We'll have all of his contacts below on this podcast episode. Thank you for joining us today, Alex.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.